posted a video back in January of this year about how I have 1,000 hours, at the time 1,100 hours of Path of Exile, and I still know nothing about the game. I put that up as my first ever PoE anything on YouTube. I got well beyond the amount of responses that I would ever expect on that video. So I definitely want to thank everyone who interacted with that video, watched it, left a comment, left a like, subscribed, whatever you did, because I never thought we'd get that far. And what we're gonna do is sort of a react, I guess, to the kind of feedback I got for the video and give you all an idea of what I have done with that information, because obviously it's not enough to just make a video and do nothing with it. You all gave me feedback and I tried my best to actually use it. So this video was made for the Affliction League. That was probably one of the best leagues in PoE's history. You all will have to correct me on that if I'm wrong. But as far as I know, that was one of the most played seasons of the entire game. It was actually a lot of fun. I played probably another 100 hours if I were to guess. We're now at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours of playtime, which I'm not making that up. That is actually what it shows. And I hadn't played the game since sometime in February because I did feel like I liked where I was, and then a bunch of other games came out, so I had to move on. But I will be back for Necropolis, and then still using the feedback you all gave me. That Affliction character is in here as Veedotme. As you can see, that is like the highest level I got besides the character I had beforehand. And I probably could have gone farther if I wanted to, but like I said, I did have to stop to play some other stuff. I would still say it's the most successful league that I've had thus far, even before you all's help, but definitely afterward. And when I say you all's help, there is a lot of comments, like a lot of comments. And not all of them are just single words. There's a lot of full paragraphs and novels. And I think one person posted a path of building, which I don't even think I asked for, but that was mind-blowing that someone could actually go in and make like a mock version of the build I'm currently running. But that's only one of many kinds of comments that I got. Obviously, there are the worst ones in here. Like this one, 1,000 hours, what have you been doing sitting in your hideout the whole time, Lamau? Like that's probably the least useful and probably the one of 3 troll comments I got. To be honest, 99% of these comments are actually useful, which is crazy to me. So I'm gonna handpick a few of these. I'm gonna start off with the most common comment that I got, which is very similar to this one here. Number 1, if you really want insights, why don't you just follow a guide? So I kind of answered that in the first video a bit. I don't really use guides for almost anything I play. It's not so much that I don't believe in guides, because they're definitely helpful and I write guides for my own games. But for the most part, for a game like Path of Exile, where you're rewarded with coming up with cool interactions between the stuff that you found and the stuff that is available in that current league, I think I found the most entertaining way for me to play the game is to sort of play it, I guess almost like a roguelike, where it's like you just found something and you try to make something out of it, or you sell it. It is possible to sort of pseudo follow a guide, like you have an idea of what a character looks like, because pretty much everything is solved except for when a league first comes out. So there's like a baseline idea of what technically works in the game, and then if you can go above and beyond that, then that's even better. But at least like with a guide, you have this blueprint that you can start off with, and then you can go from there. The second comment here, I believe you're not ready for a SSF. For those who don't know, that's solo self-funded. That's when you just go out and find items. There's no trading, there's no partying or anything like that. Damage comes from gear and you don't have the knowledge to craft it. You can do the honorable thing and not ask for help, but keep suffering through it until you get it. I respect comments like that, I really do. So I get the idea of playing trade. Trade, you have an idea of what works for the build, and someone has already made that. You can go out, farm for random stuff, sell it, get chaos orbs or whatever it's worth, and then you can get an item super easily. I actually was watching a buddy play Path of Exile, not really for the first time, but sort of as a revisit, and every time he went to craft an item, there will oftentimes be people in the chat saying this item isn't even worth 1 chaos in trade. So there's a mindset there where people who have trade mentality are able to get something that's very powerful gear for solo self-fun, whereas someone in SSF is playing with something inferior until they get the material to make something good. From the concept of you don't have the knowledge to do the craft, that's probably accurate to like the upper levels of gameplay, but I would like to believe I have at least a baseline knowledge, and a lot of commenters have come in and told me things I could improve upon, and that's helpful. I don't think that means I need to play trade because I cannot do a craft. I think I can do crafts up until I hit the next plateau, which previously was a lot lower than it is now. Now, there's other scenarios where I might be seeing people refer to crafting and I'm thinking of something at a lower level, but in fact, people have something outrageous in mind. For example, making some kind of Giga Axe using a Aisling craft from the Betrayal League. Did I do anything like that? Not really. I did have some Veiled Orbs and made what I thought was a pretty good sword, but obviously people are making things that are much more exotic than that. Especially when I look at bows. Bows, for example, have some of the wildest crafts you could ever seen that pump out incredible DPS. And I'm going to assume that swords and axes have the same access to the same powerful things, but according to some of the other comments, melee is the worst thing to play in Path of Exile, so I'm going to assume that it is not as good at crafting. So that being said, I do think that I have room to improve when it comes to crafting and meta crafting and stuff like that. But in SSF, you only have so many divine orbs, so I really could only do so much with what I had. That also sort of answers the question about playing trade. I don't plan on playing the trade server. I am going to try, I think they call it Bro SF with a couple of people from the Wholesomeverse Discord. And I'll see if that's still as entertaining as playing SSF. But for now, I can say trade is kind of off the table for me. Next, there were a lot of comments about my survivability. Obviously, the number one comment is max out your resistances and then get as much health as possible. Now that, in a vacuum, easy to do, but in reality, that was extremely difficult to put together, especially the health part. Resistances, I can always sort of piece together. I have never not had max resistances except for chaos. Even the current version of the build, I am like way over on fire, but then I have a little bit lower chaos until I get into combat, where like my rage is part of my chaos resistance. But for the most part, that was always as is. But I did get a lot of people commenting about it. I think that's just a normal thing that PoE players do, is talk about resistances. But what I will talk about, however, is block chance, evasion, spell suppression. Those three things is like every other comment in here, and for a good reason. So let's look at a comment right here. You have 15% block chance, 10% suppression chance, and no spell block. Block is massive for survivability, as is spell suppression. Block plus spell block plus suppression plus armor or evasion should get you pretty far. You also need to be immune to shock. You also need to reduce damage from critical hits. Immunity to corrupted blood. Get that chaos resistance up as high as you can. Convert one type of damage into another type of damage. Try to reduce straight damage taken. So in a lot of like non-ARPG games, I feel as though you can get away with having percentages of different kinds of mitigation. So that way, anytime those are rolled, it's a positive for survivability, and then anytime it's not rolled, something else might roll in its place. But according to most of the chatters here, if you don't have a maxed out block, spell suppress, or spell block, then they're essentially useless. I still don't really understand why that's the case, but I had a lot of commenters saying, don't even bother with that stat unless you plan to max it out. That to me is like so counterintuitive, because I feel as though you could have something and then get a positive out of it. I'm going to assume that because the affixes, whether it be a prefix or a suffix, is hard locked, then any percentage that you have in, for example, a suffix could have been something else that you actually needed instead. That being said, that whole laundry list of different kinds of damage reduction to me was like extremely difficult to just focus in on one. Even right now, I still only have like 26% block chance, 15% spell block, so it's still not maxed out. But finding where you can actually apply that to me is like impossible. But I guess that's where like super high level crafting is gonna work out. As far as getting health goes, I did manage to crack into the 4K health range, which is still not as much as it should be. I can say that with confidence. However, a lot of commenters came in talking about petrified blood. When I originally made the character, I had whatever the purple magi was, and that was because I wanted that blood spell kind of stuff. I know petrified blood is not that exactly, it's just another way to defend yourself. It's almost like, I only ever compare it to Death's Dance from League of Legends. It just keeps you alive so long as you're continuing to do damage. And then we had to up our life leech, which I thought was pretty good beforehand, but obviously it was nowhere near enough. And honestly, I still don't feel like I life leech or regen as much as I should be, but it's in a better spot than it was before. Obviously, life leech is dependent on damage, but before I go into that, the other part about survivability is armor and evasion. When I first made the video, I had what I think is called Mage Bane, which removes all of your evasion and grants you, I believe, spell suppression in place of that. But again, everyone said if you aren't maxing spell suppression, don't even bother, which I still don't really understand that, except in the context of removing your evasion. Because I, for one, did not really value evasion as much as I should. Evasion isn't really the way it works in other games where it's just a % chance to avoid damage. People like to consider evasion like a war of attrition in this game, where at some point you will take a hit. And that's kind of how evasion is supposed to work from what I understand. So in my previous gear setup, I had 2 full armor pieces, 1 armor evasion hybrid, and then just a pair of evasion shoes because it was like the best resistances I had at the time. And YouTube comments had me to basically do all hybrid armor. So every single piece I now have is an armor evasion piece, except for my boots. I'm not gonna talk about that just yet. But that also means we're running Grace, which is an aura that gives us additional evasion. Previously, when I first made my characters, everyone said that once you get determination, your survivability skyrockets. And that is probably the case, but armor in this game only helps you so much. There has to be like additional layers to protect you against things that armor is not gonna protect you against. And furthermore, apparently armor doesn't even protect you from all the physical damage you're gonna take anyway. So that's where things like the evasion comes in. The game is telling me that my estimated chance to evade an attack is 65. I'm going to assume that's not the highest it should be. And that's not saying that it's a coin flip to get hit or not. It's like, it's very weird from what I understand, but that 65% evasion chance is much more useful than however amount of spell suppression I got from Mage Bane. So I would like to say that the combination of Grace with evasion gear, with petrified blood, I believe I now have like reduced critical hit damage and stuff like that. I do technically have less life because I'm using petrified blood, and it cuts it down to only like 2,700 or something. But I'm taking a % damage reduction from all damage, I believe. So it's probably worth more than not running it and only having the 4K HP. Now, of course, the other part of survivability is to literally kill the monsters. If the monsters are dead, then you will no longer die to them. And this was a lot to take in. I had so many comments telling me to get rid of the crit setup. Now, I think that's because not everyone understood how we were doing critical hits. And to be fair, I over-exaggerated how often I critically hit. So to just give a little bit of idea how the build originally worked, this was Ambush Rage Vortex. Ambush gives you an incredibly high crit rate and it snapshots it onto the Rage Vortex. So long as I keep Rage Vortex up, it is always doing the same critical hit rate, and then Ambush also applies a massive crit multiplier. So as I said, I was not 100% crit, but when using a ring such as this one, Romir's Banquet, it can show you what your general crit rate is by adding and removing power charges. And I would say like probably around 80% of the time, I would not have a power charge. And then as soon as I get a power charge, which means I did not crit, it would instantly get removed. So the crit rate was fairly high, but it is a lot of investment in order to do that. Not only item-wise, but also in the passive tree. So a comment like this one here, you're stretched a bit too much in damage scaling. I don't think you have 100% crit. You probably have like 10. Also, accuracy, 82% needs to be fixed. That is accurate, no pun intended. I would say drop all the crit nodes, fix accuracy, blah, blah, blah. So while that's like not entirely true to what was happening, the thought process behind it is correct. We are putting a lot into damage scaling via crit when we could be focusing on both accuracy and damage at the same time by utilizing this node over here called Precise Technique. I never used this thing before because I was under the assumption that scaling critical damage is the bee's knees. Like if you can do that, then it's far superior to anything else. But obviously that involves point investment. This is 1 point for 40% damage compared to all the other points I put in to add to critical damage. So I get that and I understand that. So what that means is that we swerved out of crit and I needed to swerve into accuracy and damage. Part of that involved two things really. First off is items. We still have pretty much all the same items here except for two noticeable changes. One is that we were able to get this Bear's Girdle. This thing gives you crushed enemies when you have a certain amount of rage, physical damage per rage. It wasn't all that difficult to get. In fact, I got extremely lucky by having one of these Einhard memories, which gave me, it might be this one specifically, it gave me Sacred Grove, which gives you higher access to seeds. Seeds are part of this hoarder crafting stuff, so I have to do it anyway. Inside of there was a unique bear, and the bear happened to drop that belt. And that, once that happened, I knew I had to go ahead and swerve out of crit. But then the other part to it is that now that I don't have ambush, we have some extra slots. And according to some of the chatters, we should be using totems. Now, I didn't think that the totem would have like that much of an impact for two reasons. One, my build is very much on the move because once I start spinning, I don't want to stop or else I'm losing rage. Because of that, if I were to place down a totem, I'm going to actually lose the benefit of the totem as soon as I'm out of range. Some people solve that by investing in one of the nodes down here, where like once you leave the totem's range, you still get the benefit of it over the course of like 4 seconds or something. I happen to get a unique that does that for me. We can only have one maximum ancestor buff at a time, but I'm able to just toss it down and then keep going. And that helps me with the gameplay because it's already kind of tight to like use Cleave of Rage to get rage and then spend it with Rage Vortex and then go until I need rage again. Like that's actually gameplay that I don't want to screw up by adding more buttons to it. Now, the other thing that I was able to add in, because Rage Vortex with Ambush is an Exert is also part of the Warcry setup, we had the ability to start adding in Warcry. Now, I was doing Warcries in the past because I was running this belt where whenever my rage reached a certain amount, then I would actually cleanse my debuffs, all the curses on me, and then my rage would actually jump up to almost maximum. However, because I wasn't running this belt anymore, we had the Bear's Girdle, now I don't have that option, so that means I had to change my ascendancies a bit. I mean, luckily enough, we got rid of all the crit stuff up above, but I ended up being able to run Warbringer, which has a little bit of Warcry synergies in it. And then we went ahead and added Aspect of Carnage. I really didn't want that increased damage taken, but everyone insisted that the 40% more is by far better than the 10% over time. But anyway, now that we have Ambush gone, we have 2 Warcries that are very important to use. Enduring Cry was the first one. In fact, Enduring Cry, when having it on left click, was extremely good. Unfortunately, because of Warbringer, I will oftentimes just eat my rage when I didn't really mean to. So I had to actually take it off my movement button, and then I have to use it manually. As like a gameplay perspective, it's definitely not fun to do that, but it ended up being what we have to run anyway. As far as the Exert goes, we can now bring in Intimidating Cry, which is double damage. Now again, it's a snapshot, so the same way how Ambush snapshot the entirety of the crit rate, Rage Vortex has a snapshot of the entirety of Intimidating Cry, which actually worked out to be a very good DPS bump. It is in there in POB, as Rage Vortex has a 100% chance to deal double damage. So weird, but that is how we were able to calculate it. And I do think it works very well. Again, that's not something that I came up with myself. There were commenters who told me that Intimidating Cry was a pretty good way to go. So with that damage, I was able to do some content I've never done before. Of course, I'm not pushing uber variants of bosses because according to the articles and interviews with the GGG staff, some people stop their characters before they even get to the ubers. So I'm glad I am not alone in that endeavor. But we were able to take out some of those non-uber variants, things like the Watcher and stuff like that I was able to do for the first time. And I know that's probably a very small achievement for people playing on trade, but for me, doing SSF without guides or anything like that is actually a tremendous improvement for me. From my favorite content, I was finally able to get a timeless jewel. I have never been able to get one of these ever in the amount of time I played this game. And in this round, in this season, I was able to get 2 timeless jewels. One was Militant Faith, which does some stuff with devotion. I don't really understand it, but I'm probably going to assume that I'm not supposed to use it. Oh, apparently I got 3. Another one is this Marikath one. Again, no idea what it does. If I equip it, I see some things about crit rate, accuracy, move speed, minion damage, blast charges, more crit rate, so I probably couldn't run it. And then the major point for this is you are blinded, blind doesn't affect your light, and then more crit rate while you're blinded. So obviously I couldn't run that. However, I ended up getting this Lethal Pride one. The Lethal Pride is actually extremely interesting. It's giving me stuff like life regeneration, percent strength, converting damage into fire damage, melee damage, which is huge, totem damage, which is worthless, but I mean, it's something, right? So I'm using that full time, and that is actually an improvement for my character. I would not be able to get this if I didn't have the damage to do Legion consistently, even though it's my favorite type of content, and I always run it every time I start up a new league. However, over here in the left-hand side, you get access to Chainbreaker, where mana recovery from regeneration is not applied. Instead, you regenerate mana for every 25 mana regen. And I thought to myself, wait, Chainbreaker, I think I saw this in a Zizaran video like a year ago when he was running some kind of earthquake setup. I thought I actually was gonna pop off from getting this, but then I found out that at some point this got changed, like a full rework. Every skill that you use costs 3 rage. And I thought to myself, that's probably not that bad, right? Because I have so many rage generation machines, and then all I have to do is invest in mana regeneration, and then I'll be able to have all the rage I want. Unfortunately, in order to get even 4 rage per second, you need 100 mana regen per second. That is like, that's a big number, right? For just 4 rage. And you all may say that 4 rage is a lot. I'm gonna assume you're not. I'm gonna assume you're gonna tell me it's trash. But now, like, every time I use a skill, it's using rage. That's my war cries. That's my cleave of rage, I think. I don't even think it has to use mana. I think it just, anytime you press a button, it's -3 rage. There is stuff to help mitigate that, but I don't think you can go down to 0. I think at best you could go down to maybe 1. In fact, I had a lot of uniques in here that I thought I could like giga cook a build using that. I thought maybe the Ulnitol's Kiss with vulnerability on hit would be massive, but then the knockback when we have Rage Vortex felt awful to play. I thought that the Calm Spirit would be legit because we have additional rage per second, but then we lose all of our life regen, which wouldn't be all that bad if I didn't have a permanent poison on my character due to Rite of Ruin. You lose like a percentage of your life per second per rage, so I couldn't do that either. And then there's some additional onslaught stuff and some one-handed swords I was hoping to get. I never got the unique one-handed sword from Betrayal, which does like double damage or something like that. I ended up in a point where, like, in order for me to actually grow my character, I would have to replace my weapons with things that I just wasn't finding. Even though, like, I do consider this to be a very good sword, like, there's other things out there that I think are better than this. And then the axe is, like, probably best in class until you get the specific axe from Heist, which is this axe but better. So I think I plateaued on the weapons themselves, in which case the only thing I could possibly do is to get new uniques that would give me like a global damage increase. But I don't say that from an area of disappointment. Like, this is still the best I have ever done character-wise, and I know that I could do more if A, I had more time to do it, and B, I got lucky with Divine Orbs, because I'm pretty sure I have none. As I said, I will be playing the new season. I'm very excited for it. It does look kind of complicated, and it does look a lot slower too, having to do a mechanic every single time you click into a new area. But I'm sure overall it's gonna be a good time. I still don't have a league starter for the new season. I think I'm gonna play something not melee, however. Not that I don't like melee, but let's take a quick look at how many times melee is mentioned here. Follow a good build guide, don't play SSF, don't play melee. I think playing melee is fine if you're on trade. I only played melee one time once I got a good weapon for it, since crafting it is quite expensive and time consuming. Don't play melee builds if you're new to the game. Melee is definitely the harder route compared to spells and bows. So yeah, I do enjoy melee. According to YouTube commenters, melee got, I think, nerfed a little bit in the next season, just in general, or at least nothing was added to help it out. So I do want to try using something not melee for once. So yeah, that's basically it. Again, I want to thank everyone for their feedback. I really thank you all because I probably would have plateaued a lot sooner if it wasn't for you. It sucks I don't have a POV I can show you because it's like new season right now, and then I don't know how to access what my character looked like in the old season. Regardless, what I end up doing on the new character, I'll probably make another video, kind of like the first one, where it's just a new player recap of where I'm at in Path of Exile. If you like that kind of thing, let me know in the comments, subscribe, like the video, etc, etc. Again, I never thought the last video would get anywhere near the traction it did, so I'm really happy to be able to get your PoE community involved in something like that. Either way, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.